Do you ever feel sluggish, irritable, brain fog, like you don't have enough energy to exercise or cook? What about that undeniable urge that if you just had one more cup of coffee or just a sugary treat, it'll really turn things around? What if I told you you may have a food sensitivity? There are certain foods that are actually behind your chronic fatigue. There, I'm Allison Samon, your functional nutritionist, and I work virtually with people like you to get out of chronic illness, escape from mystery symptoms, and help you redesign your lifestyle so that you can be fit, energized, and pain free in ways that are easy, fun, and sustainable. And in today's video, I'll show you how you can end your struggle with low energy so you can feel more youthful simply by eliminating foods that are wreaking havoc on your hormones and your metabolism. Because when you identify the root of the problem, your body, your life, your work, your relationships can improve dramatically. So let's dive in. Now, in our last video, we talked about food sensitivities. How do you get one? How do they happen? How do you become sensitive to foods? And then what do you do about it? Now, here's the thing. If you missed that video, I suggest you go and check it out. I want to explain again what the difference is about food sensitivities and why they're so hard to uncover and why they're often dismissed in the conventional medical community. Well, first of all, food sensitivities are different than allergies, partly because they are difficult to diagnose, in that when you have a food sensitivity, you can have an adverse reaction, but it might not be noticeable to you. It's happening at a microscopic level. And the symptoms that you experience could be a delayed reaction where you're not noticing for between three hours and 3 days. By that time, you may be eating lots of foods to which you're sensitive, or a lot of that same food, and that body burden is starting to bubble over, and you can't deny the symptoms that you're experiencing. But because it wasn't an immediate reaction, it's really hard to pinpoint what food it's related to. If it's a food that you regularly eat, there's a cumulative effect in your body. Look, millions of Americans have food sensitivities and don't know it. They just think that it's normal to feel tired or that chronic fatigue is just part of a busy life. You hear that buzzword all the time. It's the number one reason why people make an appointment to see their doctor, because they feel chronically fatigued. They might not have that diagnosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, but they are exhausted. Can you relate? I certainly could. And especially when I was going through my chronic pain issues for over 10 years, exhaustion, fatigue, just feeling tired all of the time, falling asleep in places that I shouldn't be falling asleep, like in the middle of orchestra seats on a Broadway show, falling asleep, not having the energy to sustain my long work hours. I just chalked it up to having a busy life, having long work hours. And where, yes, that may be part of the equation, I'm going to show you what happens to your hormones. There's an entire hormonal cascade that occurs when you eat foods to which you are sensitive. So what exactly happens when we have a food sensitivity? I'm going to share with you some slides from a keynote presentation that I have given many, many times. And food sensitivities is a huge part of the work that I do with folks with chronic illness and autoimmune. So let's get into it. When you eat a food to which you are sensitive, that reaction can cause systemic inflammation, which can lead to a whole host of symptoms such as fatigue and brain fog, cravings, weight gain, irritable bowel syndrome, joint pain, and more. When you eat a food that you're sensitive to, your body releases histamines, which causes inflammation. More inflammation, cortisol is released to bring the inflammation down. So those are hormones being released. Now, if you're regularly consuming foods to which you're sensitive, that means that your adrenal glands are regularly working to maintain cortisol at an elevated level. And when cortisol remains high, that's when your adrenal glands and you and me become chronically fatigued. Your adrenals are what either gives you energy. Cortisol is your get up and go, right? Adrenaline. But if it's constantly pumping all of the time, you're eventually going to feel fatigued. And so eating foods to which you're sensitive means that your body is spending more time trying to combat the inflammatory effects, which gives you with less energy to function. And that's when your fatigue, brain fog, and just blah, right? And so what's more, this feeling of fatigue creates this vicious cycle. To compensate for fatigue, that's when we turn to sugary and starchy foods. Hello, I call myself a reformed sugar junkie. That is what I used to give myself energy. I prided myself in being someone who didn't drink coffee, didn't drink soda, didn't smoke cigarettes. I was a healthy person. However, I was chronically fatigued and I was feeding that feeling. I was feeding those symptoms, feeding that dysfunction with sugar. Because when you're turning to sugary and starchy foods, your body knows instinctively that it's going to give you that hit. It's going to give you that energy boost. And so when you eat the sugary, starchy, carby food, you get that spike, you get that energy hit, you get a rapid rise in blood sugar. And so we experience this as a sugar high. When blood sugar levels spike, your pancreas secretes a hormone called insulin, which removes the excess sugar from your blood, the glucose from your blood, and gets it into your cells to use as energy. This is a normal process. But when you eat an especially large amount of sugar, your body sees that as an emergency and uses insulin to get the glucose out of the blood and into the cells as fast as it can. This then causes your blood sugar levels to drop quickly. And so you experience this as a sugar crash. You get that high, high, and then that low, low. Sound familiar? And of course, once you get into the habit of eating sugary or starchy foods to bring your blood sugar back up to give you more energy, you actually can become addicted to them. I lived it for over 10 years. It is exhausting just thinking about the effects that food can have on your energy levels. I mean, 10 years ago, I was addicted. I mean, addicted to sugar. I used it as my drug. I used it to self-medicate. I used it for energy. It's what my body craved and it's what I needed for energy. And I used it all of the time and I made excuses for it all of the time because I was a health enthusiast. I worked out, so therefore I could eat whatever I want, but eventually it will catch up to you. Chronic pain set in throughout my body. I had the chronic fatigue, I had poor skin, I had constipation, kept getting injured, moody. Did I mention fatigue? Sleeplessness. I mean, I just couldn't win. Now, if you're eating sugar all day long and chasing that spike and dip and spike and dip, this is why you're going to hold on to extra weight. You're going to say, I have slow metabolism. You're going to feel fatigued, but you're just going to be feeding it with more coffee, more likely highly sugared coffee, right? So more caffeine. If you missed that video, check out the video on what caffeine is doing to your hormonal balance, and then add all that sugar and that blood sugar dysregulation. And now you will understand why you feel so fatigued. Now, certain foods tend to cause more inflammation than others. Chief among them is gluten, which we know is a protein that's found in wheat and grain products, but there's also corn and soy and dairy. And another reason so many people are affected by wheat and corn and soy is that these foods are loaded with pesticides and fungicides. They're often highly processed, and many of them have been genetically modified. And so a quick review, if you haven't seen any of my videos on genetic modification, Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are organisms that have been created in a lab. They do not exist in nature. Suffice it to say, our bodies are not designed to digest these foods and therefore go haywire whenever we ingest them. When it comes to gluten, Dr. Mark Hyman has said not only do many of us have a difficult time processing gluten, the wheat we consume in America has a much higher gluten content than wheat in its traditional form. It's not that all grains are bad, which you will often hear if you have autoimmune disease or chronic illness. You have to eliminate all grains. It's not that. It's not even that all wheat is bad, because I argue you don't have any symptoms at all, any hormonal issues, any skin issues, any brain issues, any digestive issues, then wheat can be fine as part of your daily diet. It's the way we grow crops in the United States. Genetic modification has altered what a grain is. Quick disclaimer, wheat itself has been hybridized to grow faster and in more abundance, which means it has a higher gluten content. It's not genetically modified, as in it doesn't exist in nature. Genetic modification will often pair a food or animal DNA with a pesticide, don't exist in nature, or two things that couldn't reproduce in nature. Like you couldn't mix a cat and a dog, but you can mix two different types of dogs. That would be hybridization, breeding two different types of wheat together to make a more robust, stronger, faster growing wheat that's higher gluten content. I digress. The problem with corn is that not only is most of it, about 95%, genetically modified, but there is often cross-contamination of corn and fungi due to the way it's grown. So fungus puts out mycotoxins, and those are the most abundant source of toxins in our nation's food. I can't tell you how many clients come to see me, and it turns out that they have mycotoxins. That is something that with further testing, we can uncover for you too. And then, of course, there's soy, second most grown crop in America after corn. Over 90% of all soybeans grown in the United States is genetically modified, bred to withstand herbicides, which is great for the company that's producing them, which is often, by the way, the same company that's producing herbicides. Pretty neat trick, right? Sell farmers on, you need to buy these seeds that resist herbicides. Oh, and by the way, here's the herbicides that you need to pour on these seeds so that they will survive herbicides. But then you are bringing in all of these herbicides into your body, and your body don't like it so much. All of the bugs, bacteria in your microbiome are affected by bringing in herbicides, pesticides, chemicals designed to kill bugs. You're filled with bugs. When we eat a crop that has been sprayed with lots and lots and lots of fungicide or pesticide, your body is going to react to them because it's not something that you're supposed to be consuming. There's a skull and crossbones on pesticides for a reason. It's poison. So additionally, commodity crops like corn and soy are grown in abundance, and that's why they're genetically modified. It's not because there's some ulterior motive, some grand conspiracy to make you sick. It's that we use them for animal feed. That's a whole nother story. We use the derivatives for all of the packaged and processed shelf-stable foods that Americans are consuming in our busy, busy lifestyle that is actually perpetuating keeping us sick and tired. Therefore, we found that we're bombarded with all of this genetically modified stuff, and we don't even realize it. And one theory that's gaining traction in the scientific community is that GMOs overtax our digestive system, and they cause sensitivity to the foods that contain them. So it's also any other food that we eat along with it. And I've talked about this before. Protein in otherwise healthy food gets tagged and it's guilty by association just because it came in with genetically modified foods. Another common sensitivity is to casein. It's one of the proteins that's found in dairy products, and it's different than lactose and lactose intolerance. And that happens when you lack the enzyme to break down lactose and be able to digest it. Casein is a different protein. It's slow digesting and sticky. It can gum up your intestines. Now, to put this in perspective, human breast milk has about 20% casein, whereas cow's milk has about 80%. Now, casein and gluten sensitivity often go hand in hand and are implicated in a leaky gut. Basically, when you have a leaky gut, that means that the lining of your intestinal wall is inflamed and the sticky proteins poke holes into that barrier, leaking undigested food particles into the bloodstream where it doesn't belong. Now your immune system is sounding the alarms because it's seeing your food as foreign invaders, as germs, as pathogens. In fact, a recent study published in the European Journal of Nutrition provides strong evidence that casein causes gut inflammation. Keep in mind, a cow's milk is designed to grow a baby cow, which has 2 stomachs, by the way, from 70 pounds to 1,000 pounds in 15 months. Human milk is designed a bit differently. So what can you do to avoid all of this chronic fatigue? Number one, make sure that you are not eating foods to which you are sensitive. There are different ways we can do that. You can do the blood test route to figure out what your food sensitivities are. There is the elimination and challenge diet. So where we do some journaling and eliminate some foods for a certain period of time based on how you've been feeling, how you've been tracking, what your own personal data is telling you. Can be 3 weeks time. It really depends. But during this window, my clients usually experience a lot of symptom relief, a lot of changes from decreased bloating to more energy, weight loss, improved skin, fewer headaches, just all of that inflammation just starting to go away. And that's actually how I started. The food sensitivity testing didn't come into play for me until it's further down the line. And that's also why it's not the first thing I do when I start working with a client. We get to know your body and how food fits in your body. And then after an elimination phase, that's when we move into the challenge phase, where we one by one will start adding back some of those foods and see, how do you feel? Are the symptoms coming back? Do you suddenly have a headache? Did you bloat? Did you start gaining weight? Are you getting itchy? Are you feeling achy? You're not sleeping as well. Your bathroom habits are not as good. And so you're doing it systematically one at a time to see if it's the food, if it's an amount of food, or if it's eating of that food over time. Because as you now know, when you have food sensitivities, it can take 3 hours to 3 days to experience symptoms. And so that's why we add back one food per every 3 days and see, is there a tolerance? Is there a body burden limit? If not, that food is safely brought back in. And we don't do it in a vacuum. We're also, when you're working with me, we're also healing your gut at the same time. So you are more likely to be able to bring many more foods back, especially if you had testing done and a lot of foods needed to be pulled temporarily. The idea is not to give you a very limited, restrictive diet, but to ultimately have your diet be expanded so much that you're getting lots of diversity. And because diversity is what helps to keep a healthy microbiome, which keeps a healthy brain, which keeps all of your hormones signaling properly. You get it? There's a method to the madness. And so if you wanted to eliminate or felt the need to eliminate dairy, there's plenty of non-dairy milks available, non-dairy cheeses available to you, non-dairy ice creams available to you. My gosh, there is everything under the sun. So don't you worry at all. And in place of pasta, if you're used to your gluten-free pasta, there are so many gluten-free pastas nowadays. Oh my gosh. If you had tried this 15 years ago, you would have suffered. Now you have bean pasta and quinoa pasta and rice pasta and squash pasta and lentil pasta. There's so many different types of pasta. Zucchini pasta, right? And then of course, if you are vegetarian, let's say, or if you just really like having tofu, make sure that it's organic or have things like mushrooms, or if you eat meat, have meat, but beans are a great substitute, mushrooms, or just make sure that it's organic. Fermented, even better. And just limit the amount of soy products, but actual fermented soybeans, edamame, perfect. Great things to add in. Instead of wheat-based or corn-based products, cereals, granolas, nuts and seeds, steel-cut oats, all of these things can give you extra fiber, extra minerals without the starchiness, the high glycemic load, which is going to affect that sugar cascade, and also just bring you extra nutrients and helping to keep your blood sugar balanced, to keep your energy levels up when they need to be up, and they come down when they need to come down based on the good old sun setting and melatonin rising. That's what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to have high cortisol levels all day long, right? Right. Make sure that you are having organic, have any of those more inflammatory foods. It's not that there's not a place for them. It's not that you have to eliminate everything, even gluten. But if you are having chronic pain symptoms, chronic illness symptoms, brain fog, and chronic fatigue, you may want to look at what the role the food is playing in that hormonal cascade. Oh, and then of course our friend sugar, which is also one of the 5 most genetically modified crops. So you might want to pull gluten, keep an eye on dairy, corn, soy, and sugar. Make sure that they are all organic, non-GMO, and let's talk further. If you feel like, yeah, I think the food sensitivity might be an issue for me. I can't figure out what was going on with all of my hormones. Because if you're having this kind of hormonal cascade that's affecting your brain function, that's affecting your joints, that's affecting your digestion, do you think it might be affecting your sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone? Uh-huh. And your hunger and satiety cues? Uh-huh. So please comment below. Let me know how this video has resonated with you. I hope that you can see that there are a lot of things that you can do, surprising ways to boost your energy and get rid of that chronic fatigue. You don't need to have chronic fatigue. You just need to be able to balance your blood sugar, and the foods that you eat might have something to do with it. I hope this has been helpful. Please comment below. Let me know how this resonated with you, and be sure to like and subscribe so that you get notified the next time I release a video. And oh, by all means, would you please share this with someone who needs to hear it? I would so appreciate that. And don't forget to grab your chronic illness recovery guide. That is your next best step to walk through how is food fitting in your body and get you on the path to healing. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.